What's up, everybody? Give it up for DJ Arm 18, everybody. Yes.
Hey.
Blessing us with some West Coast sounds. Always nice with it.
All right, we are the Hip Hop Movie Club, YouTube show and podcast. Thank you for coming out to our screening, 10-year anniversary screening of Straight Outta Compton.
Yeah.
My name's JB. I'm from right here in the Lehigh Valley. Welcome to the show tonight.
What's up, everybody? My name is Boogie. I'm from Newark, New Jersey, representing, and thank you for coming out. I'll pass it over to my man to my left.
Hey everybody, I'm Dino Wright, co-host of the Hip Hop Movie Club podcast and YouTube show. Thank you for coming. Thank you to Arts Quest. Thank you to Anthony DeSanctis at Arts Quest. Thank you to Loud Radio PA. The ticket giveaway winners here.
Yep. Ticket winners in the house.
Thank you for coming.
Good luck.
Thank you.
And big thanks to Professor Andrew McIntosh, aka DJ Arm 18.
Yes.
Before we get going, announcements. Our next event is in March of next year. We will be screening Set It Off, starring Queen Latifah.
Yes.
I believe it's March 18th.
March 18th.
March 18th?
March 18th. And through the grace of our benefactors at Arts Quest and etc., our events for next year will be free.
Free. That's right.
Free.
$3.99.
No excuse now. As we said, we were screening here Straight Outta Compton, but before that, we have opening remarks from the man himself.
All right.
Professor.
Thank you.
Big round of applause for Hip Hop Movie Club. We're helping to make this happen. Please, another applause for Jacob and the whole Arts Quest SteelStacks staff for helping this happen. We got Iceberg making a documentary right here. That's dope. Again, my name is Andrew McIntosh. I'm a professor of sociology at Northampton Community College. I also am a DJ. Go by the name of DJ Arm 18 of the Nightlighters, spinning all vinyl here in Eastern PA. And this is one of those moments where those two things get to intersect. So when I was told, like, hey, Arm, can you make some opening remarks for Straight Outta Compton? I was like, well, I'm a professor. Like, opening remarks for me is a good half hour, right? And they're like, no. So here's like the good news is I don't have a script. The bad news is I have a lot of slides. So I'm just going to try to go through them. And I'm going to keep looking at my man, Steve Topp, who has always been unflinchingly honest with me. And if he's getting bored, he's just going to be like, cut it.
And I have to admit, I've never seen this movie.
You never seen this movie? That's great. The last song that we heard was Grand Finale from the DOC album. It's the last time that Ice Cube, Eazy-E, and MC Ren and Dr. Dre were all on the same record together. So, this is a group that bears noting, but because I'm a sociologist, because I'm a record digger, I want to give you the context. N.W.A. didn't come out of nowhere, right? First and foremost is if this works, hopefully I'll know everything will come off nice. Like, part of my work as a sociologist is to understand culture. You got to understand the socioeconomic conditions it comes from, right? It's not going to be the only factor, but it is going to determine material access and a lot of the conditions in which the culture is being created. And so hip-hop was born out of the economic conditions of the Bronx, New York in the 1970s. This is well-recorded, well-documented. We started our first hip-hop movie series here doing the first hip-hop film called Wild Style, which was filmed in the Bronx. And so it seems appropriate to kind of give a nod to remember, okay, hip-hop culture comes out of, it didn't come out of nothing, it came out of something. And so when you look at hip-hop, it was born of that time, and the Bronx DJ parties took place in outdoor parks, high school gyms, rec rooms, and the like. And in a lot of ways, this is the origin story of hip-hop and how it kind of emerged, particularly from New York City and the East Coast. Now, if we turn our attention to the West, what's similar? What's different? I like to say, like, the East Coast, West Coast, like, they have a relationship in which there are a lot that's similar, and then there are some very sharp contrasts. What's similar is that, similar to the Bronx party DJs, the West Coast hip hop, they too threw jams out in the park, right? They just were different, right? It's LA, it's South Central California, it's not New York City, And so the geography is going to be different. Instead of being in like hole-in-the-wall clubs or and the like, it's going to be in barbecues. It's going to be at roller rinks. It's going to be at drive-in theaters, swap meets, nightclubs. This is a really important moment in hip-hop history is that West Coast hip-hop is able to kind of, if you will, expand, get this, because of the advent of the VCR. What? So because people are getting VCRs, drive-in movie theaters, which were ubiquitous in California, begin to shut down in the 1980s. Those who owned those drive-in theaters were like, well, what do I do with it? Maybe we can rent out our space for flea markets. Out west, they called them swap meets. And entrepreneuring West Coast hip-hop artists, such as Eazy-E, would roll into these swap meets, pop open their trunk, and sell their 12-inch records out the back, right? So in some ways, it's interesting, like the things that are coming out of the West Coast are, again, a product of the times. You know, if New York City was the Bronx, LA is a little bit different. It's closer to Hollywood, it's closer to the entertainment industry, and it's got an entirely different geography. And so the music sounds different. It doesn't sound like the Bronx breakbeats of James Brown and the Meters and the like. They're really favoring the funk, particularly Parliament Funkadelic, Rick James, Prince, and the like. So their parties, they were playing a lot of funk, a lot of disco, not the kind of like hardcore like breakbeats that you kind of associate with old school hip hop. So that may be true in terms of the music, like in terms of, okay, the music's going to sound a little different, but what about the socioeconomic conditions, right? We got to pay attention to that. And that's where things done change, right? By the mid-1980s, what was occurring in South Central Los Angeles wasn't wholly unique to America, but it was specific. And that was, you saw the advent of crack cocaine. Drugs had always been sold here in America in the black market, but crack cocaine was something different. It hit different. And that's a conversation for another day. I can't wait to have it with you about its origins, where it came from, and what exactly came about it. The problem with crack cocaine was that it was not just a drug, but there was a ready-made distribution system in place, and that was with the Bloods and the Crips, right? So they began to sell crack, and the profitability of crack, the violence that was associated with it, sort of took gang culture of Bloods and Crips that had been around since the 1960s, and it amplified. So what had been used to be negotiated with maybe like, fisticuffs, or maybe if you were really ill, you pulled out a knife, now was being negotiated with MAC-10s and AK-47s. And the stakes were much higher. It wasn't just about turf, it was about thousands and thousands of dollars. And so that's occurring in LA in the mid-1980s. How does that impact the music? Well, the earliest hip hop coming out of the West, as I told you, kind of sounded electro, sounded like disco, etc. But records like 6 in the Morning by Ice-T and Toddy T's Battering Ram, they began to, if you will, record what was going on in these drug wars between the gangs, turf wars, and most significantly, the LAPD's crackdown. I mean, if you think about it, this song Battering Ram is about this new vehicle in which the LAPD used to essentially run over houses that they assumed were crack houses. Not always the case, but someone would find themselves being knocked on the door with this at 6 in the morning and raided by police. And I would also say, I just want to give a shout out, West Coast hip hop is certainly unique in some ways, but I got to give a shout out to Schoolie D from west side of Philly as really the first gangster rapper, for lack of a better term.
Yes.
The PSK, Parkside Killers.
Yes.
That was a crew. It was the first time on Wax that you heard a rapper rapping about a real crew that did dirt. And then the other is Dr. Dre was very clear. He was like, oh, we loved Licensed to Ill. That the first Beastie Boys album, I did it like this, I did it like that, I did it with a baseball bat. They loved that. And they were like, that was inspirational to them. They were like, listen, we like that kind of music that has an edge. It's got an edge of violence, twist of misogyny, and it's all in good fun. Very much that characterizes the Beastie Boys' first album, and N.W.A. kind of mimicked that sound as well in records like Boys in the Hood, 8 Ball, and Dope Man. So N.W.A., coming straight from the underground, they very much, it's interesting. From what I understand, and I'm not trying to take anything from them, none of them were directly affiliated with the Bloods or Crips. Ice Cube, before his career took off, was studying to be a draftsman and was actually going to go to University of Arizona to become an architect. But this rap shit took off, and he said, all right, forget school. But what they were, I would say, is that they were excellent observers and essentially negotiating their own lives in the environment of South Central Los Angeles. And I don't think it's a mistake that they began to essentially shoot, their photo shoots and their album covers look like the Bloods and Crips hanging out on Crenshaw, etc. They were in many ways reflecting, just like the Run DMC was reflecting the B-boys out in the parks, N.W.A. was reflecting what was out in the streets that they were in. And you see it in their album covers. That's their first album where they're very much they're pictured together like a gang, like you see here. The iconic Straight Outta Compton picture too is just a sense of you as the listener are looking up with a gun being pointed to your face. I gotta admit, I've been listening to hip hop since I was mad young. I was very, very fortunate to get introduced to hip hop at the age of 6, 7. Grandmaster Flash, Furious 5. I understood that it was about a rougher side of life that I had no idea about in Bethlehem. But the first time I heard Straight Outta Compton, anybody who's familiar with that album, those first 3 songs on that album, Straight Outta Compton, Fuck the Police, Gangsta Gangsta, they hit you like a Mack truck. It is an unbelievable, unflinching, and menacing, funky sound to what is occurring in Compton in South Central Los Angeles. So essentially, what N.W.A. begins to do that I think is of note and has an impact on not just hip-hop, but popular culture, is that they really begin to blur the line between kind of entertainment and violence. It's not that Hollywood or the music industry never had moments of violence, right? Whatever happened to the Rolling Stones guitars? Yes, I would love to know. Or other moments in rock and roll history, R&B history, or jazz history. But N.W.A. was so brazen about it, so brazen. And that way they had a way of kind of speaking to this supposed violence that was occurring in there. A lot of people didn't believe them. Honestly, they thought they were shucksters. They thought they were essentially shilling sex and violence for a profit. They didn't disagree. They were yep, we're here to make money. But then as time went on, some things began to bear themselves out that proved to the rest of America, if you will, that what they were rapping about very much was real. So in April of 1991, we know Rodney King, after sort of in a drug haze, flees LAPD, is pulled over. Obviously, they need to apprehend him, but they apprehend him in such a fashion that it's caught on videotape that made it look like it was sport. 4 police officers are indicted, but over 10 LAPD officers take part in the beating of Rodney King for over 11 minutes. It's caught on videotape. Everyone is certain that they are going to face jail time. All 4 are acquitted. All right? They're acquitted in the spring of 1991, and essentially South Central Los Angeles explodes in violence. This, in a lot of ways, if you will, took this term, gangster rap, the culture of gangster rap, and legitimized it, for lack of a better word. Suddenly people were listening, people who were sympathetic and people who were not, either way. And so N.W.A. became more than just kind of a sideshow. They became voices for a generation. And this is important to note because this is a black, particularly in Black America, a generation without its leaders, right? I mean, Martin Luther King didn't die of old age. Malcolm X didn't die of old age. Their leaders were killed. And so in the vacuum of that become, hip-hop artists like Chuck D and Ice Cube, etc., become this kind of voice. But let's remember, they are a part of an entertainment business too. So it begins to kind of blur the line of what are we listening to? Is it reality? Is it fact? Is it fiction? I look at Cube, the group begins to break up, and it's Cube who really, in a lot of ways, it's interesting to hear other members of N.W.A. say, yo, we were revolutionaries. And it's listen, I don't know about you guys, because some of your records, She Swallowed It, Just Don't Bite It, Fight 'Em, Fuck 'Em, and Flee, One Less Bitch, I don't know how revolutionary that was, right? It was Cube that had really, the voice that spoke to the state and the police essentially oppressing South Central Los Angeles residents. And when he goes solo, he really takes no shorts in who he's attacking. He's basically attacking him, and I would also give credit to Ice-T, everything in the status quo of America in the early 1990s. I gotta be, people who are shocked about the discourse of American politics and culture right now, I'm you just weren't paying attention. Artists like Ice Cube, the hardcore scene, if you take a look at the punk and hardcore scene in the 80s and 90s, we're pushing back in this kind of way against the establishment in a very, if you will, no holds barred. I also can't give a presentation about N.W.A. without talking about their unrepentant misogyny. In a lot of ways, I grew up, knowing the words to "a bitch is a bitch," off the top of my head at the age of 14. I agreed with Ice Cube. I was like, yo, the title bitch don't apply to all women, but all women got a little bitch in them. Like, really? All right? And it's something that I had to reconcile as I had my first daughter at 19. I ended up having 3 daughters. And I'm like, wait a second, is this music that I really, quote, identify with? And then there's another piece of this, is that as N.W.A. becomes bigger and bigger throughout the 1990s, other artists do. The hip-hop music industry, the entertainment industry at large, seems to adopt this misogyny, right? And it becomes essentially normalized. And I think one of the things that has happened with N.W.A. is that we tend to have these kind of gatherings where we bring people together and we just kind of we laud their impact, as it should be noted. But we forget that in a lot of ways, there's a tremendous amount of harm and violence in their music. And I got to give a nod to Shanita Hubbard, a colleague of mine at Northampton Community College. She's a published author as well, who's been writing about this for a long time. She loves hip hop. But as she points out, people like Dr. Dre have become, almost billionaires in their career time and have on their record and admitted to violence against other women, right? And at no point have they publicly come out and kind of reconciled that. I get it that once you do your time, you shouldn't be tried for double jeopardy. But if they are positioned in such a way in which they can make this amount of money, you would think that they could show some social responsibility. I mean, my man has daughters himself, about speaking to the music that maybe he made back then. Whether he wants to distance himself, explain himself, or what have you. But in the end, they just kind of keep cashing in. And so as Shanita Hubbard said, if we truly love music, hip-hop culture, and the women who are suffering in silence, then we should collectively use our power to create something better. I think far too often, we sit around and wait, particularly for black women to show up and kind of school us. And I think it's incumbent upon us men who grew up with this music and we know it word for word, line for line, to maybe have these conversations as well. So I feel like it's important to say that in regards to N.W.A.'s history. I'm going to end it with this, and that is, the show must go on. The motherfucking saga continues with N.W.A. To this day. These 5 members, I didn't quite know where the source of this came from, but based upon my knowledge, it's pretty accurate. If you look at the 5 members of N.W.A., their family tree, if you will, stretches to 2025, starting in the mid-1980s. And so, early on, you may notice some of these artists, early on, in some ways N.W.A. got a lot of pushback. Like some of these groups were considered jokes because they didn't have the lyrical chops. But over time, they proved themselves well adept to dominating the industry. And you start to see that when, Ice Cube goes solo, and you see different artists that they begin to cultivate, like Del the Funky Homo Sapien. Or Eazy-E signs this group called the Ataban Clan, otherwise known as the Black Eyed Peas, right? And you go throughout the 1990s, Tupac ends up on death row. It changes his career forever before the end of his life. And a lot of rappers that they, like those 5 members, cultivated and put on and platformed, grow to become household names. Out of Death Row Records, you have, of course, most notably Snoop Dogg. And then, in addition, out of Death Row Records comes Aftermath, right? And Aftermath and Eazy in the mid-1990s are putting on different artists. Bone Thugs and Harmonies, the Eazy-E project, really helps Midwest hip-hop to get put on the map. Aftermath Entertainment struggles for a little bit. Dre had a song called Been There, Done That. And it was like, yeah, Dre, we've been there, done that. We do. What do you got new for us? And really was not sure whether Dr. Dre's career was going to last the change in hip-hop music in the 1990s. And then he decided, you know what, I'm betting everything. He bet the house on a white rapper named Marshall Mathers from Detroit. That changes hip-hop and Dr. Dre's career forever. Eminem is instrumental in hiring getting 50 Cent on the Aftermath. 50 Cent had an outsized impact on early hip-hop in the aughts. I think he's kind of overrated now. He kind of reminds me of the Dallas Cowboys. Your championship was a long time ago, bro. But he still, claims himself quite relevant. If I said that in his presence, he'd probably snap me in two. Last but not least, Dr. Dre was also instrumental in platforming TDE Entertainment and Kendrick Lamar, a rapper who I would say at this particular moment stands head and shoulders above so much of hip hop culture. So much so that my 88-year-old mother knows who Kendrick Lamar is. At one point she said to me, she was like, he doesn't really like that Drake guy, does he? I'm like, no, Ma, he doesn't, right? And I'm like, wow, how is it that Kendrick-Drake beef gets to my mother? Otherwise, you know, if it's not because of N.W.A. and Dr. Dre and others and the way that they've created hip-hop. So that's enough for me. Thank you for listening. I hope it was informative. And by all means, enjoy the movie.